Our country today stands at a crossroads. There is no third path, only two. One is the road towards freedom, independence, peace and progress. The second is the road towards stress, conflict, sabotage and corruption. You alone, the Libyan people, after bitter experiences, have to choose which path.
Meanwhile, the son of former leader Muammar Gaddafi has also registered as a candidate in next month's presidential race. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi will be among the contenders in the elections set to be held on the 24th of December. The polls will be a key moment for Libya as it seeks to establish a stable democracy after a decade of turmoil following Muammar Gaddafi's overthrow in 2011. Saif's decision to run for the presidency has prompted sharply divided reactions among Libyans.
We hope that these elections will be an opportunity to establish the Libyan state and not an opportunity to jump on power. It is an issue that in fact caused us frustration and disappointment because I wish that the elections would be an opportunity for establishment. Libya has been deprived for a long time from being a state, considering the size of its capabilities, the size of the opportunities it has, and the size of the cadres it has built over these years.
There are those who want him, and there are those who do not want him. In the end, he arrived and was able to present his papers. My opinion and the opinion of others will not advance or delay anything. The opinion is now held by the people who are at the forefront of the scene, the voters.
While Saif al-Islam Gaddafi has rarely appeared in public since the 2011 uprising that ousted his father. Here's CGTN's Adel Mahroui with more details.
Late Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi's second eldest son joins the presidential race. Saif al-Islam appeared wearing a traditional Libyan outfit just like his father, signing his candidacy application at the nation's elections committee.
His appearance showed that Saif al-Islam is well, safe and free. It's good indication that he was given the opportunity to file his candidature like any other Libyan. He appeared in Sabah, a city secured by Libyan National Army, which is a strong indication to who could be supporting him.
Saif al-Islam's political ambitions to lead Libya were clear during his father's rule. The 2011 uprising, however, saw him imprisoned for 5 years until he cleared his name from all criminal accusations in domestic courts.
I think he has one of the strongest chances in the presidential race. He can bank on the legacy of his father. What happened after 2011 of chaos and instability could be in his favor. He must, however, show rational policy for the coming period in Libya. He will need to rebuild trust between all Libyans.
The International Criminal Court still has an active arrest warrant against Saif al-Islam for accusations of war crimes during the uprising. ICC has not yet convicted him of any crime. The son of the late President Muammar Gaddafi officially returns to political life for the first time since the 2011 uprising. Saif al-Islam is by far the most controversial candidate in this presidential race. Already, some political groups are trying to stop his candidature by appealing to the elections committee. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Sudan's political crisis continues to threaten the country's economy as the Sudanese people wrestle with high inflation, above average food prices and uncertainty over the future. Weeks after the military seized control, following protests and a blockade of the country's main port, essential goods are still scarce. There are some signs of relief, though, as market prices stabilize slightly, as Naba Muhideen reports from Khartoum.
After weeks of turmoil, Sudan's Central Bureau of Statistics is claiming the inflation rate is decreasing for a second month in a row. But the political upheaval in eastern Sudan has affected the supply of goods to other parts of Sudan, mainly because protesters had blocked the country's main port. For shop owners at Bahri Market, there are signs of recovery.
Yes, there's a consistent drop in prices, especially the price of sugar. As traders, we couldn't have goods due to the port blockade. Now there is.
There are different reasons behind the increase in prices and the current drop. I think the port blockade and the political turmoil in the country. But as citizens, we don't care about the reasons as much as the affordability for us.
The port blockade was suspended in November after the military took control over the country and responded to tribal demands in eastern Sudan. Despite the apparent improvement in the situation, there are fears over political instability and the country's ability to recover economically. Naba Muhiddin, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
Meanwhile, Sudanese journalists have staged a procession near the military headquarters in Khartoum on Tuesday. They are denouncing the military control over power and the repression against journalists. That's after the authorities arrested the Al Jazeera bureau chief and issued stern directives to journalists.
As journalists, we want the restoration of the civilian government and democratic change. We want freedom of expression in journalism, as it's a vital monitoring tool and it's needed in the upcoming days.
This protest shows the journalists' concern for people's aspirations. When Sudanese rallied in December 2019, they wanted civilian-led democratic change. So we can't accept going back.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Chinese President Xi Jinping called for an increase in cooperation and communication as he meets virtually with U.S. President Joe Biden. And we tell you how the indigenous people in the Congo are finding their identity and citizenship. The Chinese and U.S. presidents have held a virtual summit. The talks are the third time that the two leaders have spoken after two previous phone calls. The Chinese president called for more communication and cooperation, while his U.S. counterpart highlighted a need to avoid open conflict. Li Jianhua has the details.
The meeting lasted for around 3 hours. It opened with two presidents extending a warm greeting. Xi Jinping said China is ready to move relations forward in a positive direction.
As the world's two largest economies and permanent members of the UN Security Council, China and the U.S. need to increase communication and cooperation, each run their domestic affairs well, and at the same time, shoulder their share of international responsibilities and work together to advance the noble cause of world peace and development.
For his part, Biden said they need to establish common-sense guardrail.
And I look forward to a candid and forthright discussions like all the discussions we've had thus far. It seems to me our responsibility as leaders of China and the United States is to ensure that the competition between our countries does not veer into conflict, whether intended or unintended.
The press was allowed to observe the opening of the summit before the leaders continued speaking privately. Several thorny issues were expected to top the agenda, including Taiwan and the trade war.
Their meeting is mainly to control the direction of U.S.-China relations. There have been several rounds of talks before this. Biden is faced with external and internal problems. The immediate challenge is his approval rating is falling. He also needs to implement the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The U.S. may need China's help as it pursues an expansionary fiscal policy and industrial structure reform.
The meeting comes amid growing tensions over Taiwan, a red line for China. Experts say the U.S. is using the island as a tool to contain China.
As Beijing has made clear, the Taiwan issue really threatens both sides making progress on other fronts, but it's a key element in America's anti-China containment strategy, and it won't be abandoned easily.
Despite differences, the two sides have been working together in areas of common interest. including fighting climate change and the pandemic. At the COP26 climate summit this month, they issued a joint statement to try to lower carbon emissions. Based on previous high-level talks over the past year, the Biden administration did take some hardline stances against China. But what's different is China has been hitting back hard this year, urging the US to treat China with equality. Tensions certainly remain, but at least the two countries are willing to talk. Li Jianhua, CGTN, Beijing.
For more analysis of the meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden, CGTN's Dong Shuwei spoke with Li Cheng, director of the Brookings Institute's John Thornton China Center.
What did you think of the meeting overall? A success or not?
Well, I think it's a success. From the body language, I found the very nice smiles of the two top leaders. President Xi Jinping called Biden my old friend, and Biden also used thanks for 4 times. Appreciate Xi Jinping's congratulations when he became president, last November. So it's really quite remarkable. We should put in the background, as we know that the U.S.-China relations have deteriorated in recent 2 years or maybe even longer at a speed and the scope beyond what could have been predicted. Now, so this summit certainly stop or at least halt this kind of deterioration and show some goodwill. It could be very, very important to cool down antagonistic view. But of course, I still will not think this is a turning point. I think both sides realize that the U.S.-China relation has also confronted some structural problem in terms of global political economic landscape change affect both countries. The meeting lasted longer than supposed to be, and also it's very late in Washington. So I think that it's fair to say it's a success, but does not necessarily mean that tomorrow the whole thing will change. No, U.S.-China relation will continue face some challenges and face some difficulties.
Why is it so important for these two presidents to meet, even if just virtually?
Both presidents, they met 11 times in person before. They also had numerous phone calls over the years, especially at the time both of them served as vice president, and also including 2 phone calls early this year. They also traveled together to, I think, Chongqing and also to Los Angeles, and they previously frequently called each other good friend. They also put a lot of emphasis on the personal friendship. I think that they sent a very clear message to the entire world that they try to find a way to promote cooperation, at least to avoid competition leading towards confrontation.
President Xi stressed that China and the U.S. should work together on global challenges such as climate change and COVID-19. What are their other priority areas as you see it?
Of course, for China, the Taiwan issue is the most important one. Biden reaffirmed one China policy and talk about there's no fundamental change in this issue on the U.S. side. When China negotiates with the United States, they are more interested in broad strategic kind of level, whether you treat China as an enemy or not is crucial. Now, of course, the U.S. will continue to talk about human rights, Hong Kong, and China's aggressive approach in South China Sea. I think it's better to have a candid discussion to understand each other's position.
What's the way forward now for China-U.S. relations following this meeting?
Domestic factor is important. To promote middle-class development in both countries is important. As we know, China's middle-class development over the past 30 or 40 years really benefited from the middle class in the United States because of the market, because of the consumption, etc. So the things could be the same. United States now could also benefit from China's ever-expanding middle class. It's not a threat, but it's an opportunity. It's a market. Each side has a legitimate reason, and we are the same human beings. We should not demonize each other. We probably should inspired by the common goal.
While the two heads are talking, U.S. Congress has passed the bipartisan infrastructure deal. Would this affect the meeting?
Probably it's not directly, but I think indirectly. First of all, this is overall Biden's approach for domestic audience. Infrastructure bill, especially based on bipartisan consensus, is very, very important. Now, he sometimes uses that to compete with China. Actually, he has a point because China's infrastructure development is part of China's economic miracle. You look at what happened in China, highways, ports, and airports, and also the high-speed railways, etc. United States feel it's lag behind. Biden said repeatedly we should catch up in that area. At the moment, he emphasized the competition in this area. But sooner or later, he probably will realize you need to have a foreign cooperation, whether it be financial or technological in that regard, and also in many other areas.
Well, let's now head to the Republic of Congo, where over 25,000 indigenous people are at risk of statelessness. Many lack identity papers, such as birth certificates, forcing them to face discrimination and work in menial jobs. But as CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy tells us, the government of Congo and the UNHCR are working together to change their plight by providing birth certificates.
Ngolo Damas and his family are some of at least 25,000 indigenous people in the Republic of Congo who are at risk of statelessness. Damas says he doesn't know his real age and has never been to school. And just like him, Damas's children have never had birth certificates. They also don't have identity documents. Legally, they don't exist.
My children started going to school. After 3 months, they were asked for birth certificates. The children came back saying, "We don't have documents. We won't go to school anymore." Now, they stay home.
Most of the undocumented indigenous people live in dire poverty and are struggling to make ends meet. They cannot attend school, get jobs, or access services.
We only get small amounts to eat. There is very little to sell. That is why we have no money in my family and no money to buy clothes.
With the support from the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, the government launched a campaign across the country in 2020 to issue birth certificates.
You need to have documentation to escape statelessness, which today is considered a serious human rights violation.
The country's indigenous communities are not alone in their plight. Millions of people around the world are unable to prove their citizenship. They find themselves excluded from education, medical services, and formal jobs, and are unable to move freely. Through its #IBelong campaign to end statelessness, the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, is seeking to ensure they have documentation by 2024. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Rapid urban migration is taking a toll on infrastructure in Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria. The nation's capital, Abuja, has been identified as one of the world's fastest growing cities. The United Nations estimates that African cities like Abuja will experience some of the biggest urban population growth rates by 2050. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports on some of the challenges and opportunities brought about by urbanization in Nigeria's capital.
Abuja, the seat of Nigeria's central government. It took over as the nation's capital from Lagos in December 1991. The city was built based on a well-designed master plan worthy of emulation.
When the government decided to bring back the federal capital down to Abuja, there was a plan action, to put everything in place, give the city a proper planning ranging from residential, commercial, amusements, and equally like diplomatic zones. Cities like Kigali, cities like Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and then some cities like Dar es Salaam in Tanzania have already emulated these.
According to the UN, Abuja is one of the fastest growing cities in the world, with a growth rate of nearly 140% between 2000 and 2010. City officials say there's been a surge in urban migration with an estimated population of 7 million people. One major unexpected issue has been resettling the original inhabitants of the city, like this 100-year-old woman.
The village I was born in, you cannot ask me to relocate from there. You will have to kill me first.
We have been denied governance. We have submitted memoranda to the National Assembly. The present memoranda has been, this is our number 8 memoranda, saying the same thing, correct Nigerian constitution.
The relocation was actually to put them in a particular confined area and then build houses for them, which is very, very expensive as at then. So as that was not achieved, they now try as much as possible to be compensating people with land allocation, probably around outside the city.
The United Nations projects an urban population growth of 70% by 2050, more so for cities like Abuja that record regular inflow of people. The government hopes to accelerate the development of rural infrastructure and the hinterlands in order to avoid concentration in the city center. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Up to 50,000 Egyptians are set to be relocated to the country's new administrative capital for a 6-month first phase trial. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has the story.
Life in the Egyptian new administrative capital should soon begin. The first group of public servants is planned to include 300 employees from every ministry to amass more than 3,000 people. They will be the first to test life in the new smart city for a period of 6 months, beginning this December.
The government is working on a gradual logistical plan for employees' transition. There are 5.7 million public servants working for the government. The state plans to begin with 50,000. This is still a big number, and there are many requirements for them to get accustomed to the new lifestyle. To give them such training is a big effort. The Ministry of Communication and Information Technology is leading a program for digital transformation. So far, about 25,000 got fully trained.
The new capital is about 45 kilometers away from the heart of Cairo, where public servants are mostly located. The commute could take up to 2 hours depending on traffic. To ease the journey, the government has been investing in electric trains and monorail to connect the two cities together.
To say that any new urban city succeeded, we need a bundle of incentives that would encourage people to go to the new capital and settle there and resume a new life there. Transportation is a key factor for the success of any new urban project. People must reach this new destination and return home with ease and in a timely manner. And they will also need basic services like education and healthcare, as well as entertainment elements for this project to achieve its goal.
Planners promise an opera house, a sports complex, and a 42-kilometer-long public park, besides the tallest building in Africa, 345 meters high. Employees going to the new capital can ask for a transportation allowance, or they can apply for one of more than 9,000 apartments allocated to them with subsidized prices and long-term payment plans. The $45 billion city is the biggest of the mega projects Egyptian President Sisi launched.
The 3,000 employees are part of the first phase of a public servants relocation plan that includes more than 50,000 people. All of them have administrative roles, meaning they do not directly engage with the public. The shift of the seat of power from this city, the capital of Egypt, will be the first for the country since the 7th century. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's now go to Ram Manyang for a look at the day's business news. Rama.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Kenya's debt service costs are set to rise as the Kenyan shilling hits an all-time low against the American dollar. And Egyptian regulators have given the green light for the establishment of special purpose acquisition companies. The details coming up next.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start in East Africa. Kenya's debt service costs are set to rise even further as the East African economy's currency sinks to an all-time low against the American dollar. Debt service costs are forecast to rise by about 22% in this fiscal year. The country's finance ministry is planning to spend a record $10.4 billion in the year through to June just on loan repayments. That's equal to roughly a third of tax revenue. Now, the 2.6% depreciation of the Kenyan shilling against the American dollar to about 112.06, 112.07 so far this year also raises the cost of servicing Kenya's foreign currency debt. The shilling lost about 7% of its value in 2020, given the uncertainty and the economic damage brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. According to data from Kenya's finance ministry, dollar-denominated debt makes up roughly 2/3 of Kenya's total external debt. Another 19% is denominated in the euro. The Kenyan shilling, however, has appreciated by roughly 5% against the euro so far in 2021. Over in West Africa, in less than 24 hours, Ghana's Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, will move to address investor concerns about the sustainability of that country's public debt, as well as below-par economic growth. Now, investors are deeply concerned about Ghana's ability to continue servicing its loans, with the average extra premium sought on dollar securities issued by Ghana now close to distressed levels. The general government interest expense is forecast by Fitch to rise to nearly 47% of tax revenue in 2022. That's well above the median of around 11% for nations with a similar investment rating. The government there has shown fiscal discipline before. However, Ghana did cut its budget deficit down to under 4% of GDP back in 2018 from close to 9% in 2016. That came after President Nana Akufo-Addo's government passed legislation to cap the fiscal deficit at 5% of GDP. The finance ministry there is expecting for the fiscal deficit to stand at just about 9.5% of GDP by the end of the year, compared to nearly 12% by end 2020. On to Zimbabwe now. The power utility for there, Zesa Holdings, is set to import up to 400 megawatts of generation capacity from Mozambique and Zambia. That's part of measures to try and end a crippling power crisis in the country. This comes as Zimbabwe, which has been blighted by long periods of load shedding, is planning to spend, or rather is already spending, up to $20 million of scarce foreign currency on power imports every month. And remember, that's money it really doesn't have. ZES Executive Chairman Sydney Gata says that the situation can partly be blamed on delays by Treasury to sign an independent power producer implementation agreement. Demand for power in Zimbabwe to be effectively met needs roughly 2,200 megawatts of operational generation capacity. But at this point in time, only about 63% of that is available at the moment. Up north now, for the first time ever, Egypt's Financial Regulatory Authority has put up rules on setting up and licensing of special purpose acquisition companies, or SPACs as they're better known. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has this report.
The bid to bring special purpose acquisition companies, or SPACs, to Egypt has been triggered by the successful $350 million merger between local startup Swivel with blank check firm Queen Gambit for an IPO on the US Nasdaq. Special purpose acquisition companies are firms established specifically for the purpose of acquisitions or mergers with other companies. They're seen by authorities as a new vehicle to stimulate the Egyptian stock exchange.
The Egyptian stock market has only 220 companies from an original 1,000 companies before 2016. So we need many companies to enter the EGX. The SPACs facilitate the funding process better than going through the traditional IPO procedures that take a long time with a lot of complicated terms and conditions. Therefore, SPACs will revitalize the stock market in Egypt by releasing much-needed investments.
Approvals will be related mainly to the IT industry. Regulations will be similar to the venture capital firms. Initial capital will be in the range of $320 million, and shareholders can liquidate their shares and recover their investments if they reject a certain merger by the SPAC. This step is part of an overall strategy to facilitate financing for businesses to flourish.
Different companies have been licensed to keep up with the various financing tools in international markets so that the Egyptian financial market can be competitive globally. We have mechanisms to finance micro-enterprises, SMEs, consumer financing, and now the SPACs.
Mustafa El Nagi owns Baramuda, a startup that facilitates the sales and distribution of fertilizers for small farmers around the country. He believes SPACs would give a boost for aspiring entrepreneurs like him.
Of course, as a startup in Egypt, once regulations are in place, I will apply for it. It will help us grow quicker, enter new markets, and change the investor approach towards startups away from traditional financing like angel investors, VCs, or bank loans. Now a startup can IPO in the stock market through partnership with a SPAC firm.
Experts believe it will be slow at first, because SPACs are new territory for regulators and businesses. But eventually, they're expected to be a big success in the North African country. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Tunisia's primary energy deficit fell by around 13% by the end of September as energy supplies improved. Tunisia does face the worsening energy deficit, and it largely relies on imports, mainly from Algeria. In fact, it's almost doubled its gas supplies from there within the last year. CGTN's Adin Chouachi has the details.
The monthly report of the energy situation in Tunisia revealed that primary energy resources recorded an increase of 33% at the end of September. This rise is explained by the rise in the national production of oil, gas, and also the fee of the passage of Algerian gas, which recorded a leap of 135%.
Tunisia needs to increase oil and gas exploration and development. Otherwise, the national oil production will be down to zero. We are highly dependent on Algeria in the gas supply. The Algerian-Italian pipeline allows Tunisia to benefit from 3.8 billion metric cubic of natural gas, which represents 65% of the national annual gas consumption.
According to the Ministry of Industry, Mines and Energy in Tunisia, the deficit in the energy trade balance recorded an additional 1% for the first time since the beginning of this year.
Tunisia's demand for petroleum products is rising while production in oil and gas is dropping every year. This gap between production and demand is alarming for the country's trade balance, as 40% of the trade deficit comes from the energy sector. Tunisia needs an energy strategy for the next 20 to 30 years.
Energy experts assert that the share of renewable electricity is still very limited in the North African state. It represents only 2% of primary resources.
Tunisia aims to produce 30% of its electricity needs from renewable energies by 2030. That's why it's necessary to invest in and modernize the electricity network. We need to invest in smart networks which allow us to better control and store renewable and changing energies.
The London-headquartered Multilateral Development Investment Bank has announced its readiness to fund new renewable energy projects in Tunisia. EBRD also aims to develop a roadmap to reduce carbon emissions of the Tunisian industrial sector by 2050. According to the monthly report of the energy situation in Tunisia, the restart of the economy has led to an increase in energy demand and consumption. Domestic demand for petroleum products recorded a 9% increase. The industrial sector is the main consumer of electricity with 61% of total demand. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. We'll be live in Uganda. At least 6 people, of course, have been killed, dozens more wounded after at least 2 explosions rocked the capital, Kampala, in what police are describing as a coordinated attack. So how exactly might these attacks affect Uganda's economy moving forward? We'll explore that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you at 1800 GMT. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. We sample Nigeria's film industry as seen through the set of one of the country's biggest movies in recent times.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The world's third largest film industry, Nigeria's Nollywood, has continued to record improved growth with better stories, better equipment, and groundbreaking movies. Investments in the industry are increasing as well, leading to the production of some big-budget films. One such film is The Black Book, which is being shot in several locations across Nigeria. Our correspondent Deji Bademosi was invited on the set of one of the movies recently and prepared the following report.
On the set of the making of what promises to be arguably Nigeria's best movie in recent times.
Nobody crossing the set, please. Nobody crossing, please.
Titled The Black Book, the movie has been touted as Nigeria's first $1 million plus budget film. It's a story about family and revenge, and a father seeking justice for his murdered son. This is the third major film by Nigerian director and producer Editi Effiong, who's made a strong showing since he ventured into the Nollywood industry about 4 years ago.
It's been 2 years and a half of planning and working. Our key pre-production started in March 2020. And so we had to hire the actors and put the actors through training. They had to go through physical training, they had to go through weapons training, they had to go through whip safety and stuff. Our lead had to lose weight, be in the gym for 6 months and lose weight and be the right weight and size. A couple of actors had to do the same thing. So it was a long process.
Shooting of the film began in January and is now been wrapped up. The cast and crew consist of about 200 people, drawn from 6 different countries. It also features some of Nigeria's top-rated actors.
This is one of the biggest movie sets right now. Not just in terms of the size of the cast and everything, but also the budget and everything, and the tactical setup it demands. It's a lot.
First of all, it's an amazing cast. Editi Effiong, our director, just put together an incredible story with an incredible cast in incredible locations. This movie is beautifully shot. One thing I really loved about the process was just the attention to detail. Editi was very particular about getting the details right. And it's not every day in Nollywood that you get to experience that. Oftentimes we shoot films so fast because we have to, budget constraints, all of that stuff. But with this film, we really took our time to get it right.
In an industry that has also churned out some low-quality films due to poor funding, The Black Book is challenging the status quo with its budget. The director says this provides more opportunities and avenues to explore more possibilities and make better quality films.
It's a big privilege for us to tell this story. And I think one of the things I'm most excited about is it's about the biggest production done in Nigeria ever. But it was told with Nigerian money. Every investment for this picture was raised from Nigeria, not from outside. And so I always believed that to tell the big Nigerian stories, to tell the big African stories that we need to tell, our stories, it has to be done with African money, Nigerian money. And I'm so excited that this film is being told with Nigerian money.
Nigeria's film industry, Nollywood, has come a long way. From the days of poor quality films hurriedly put together on tight budgets, the industry has since recorded tremendous growth and now attracts some big budget productions. The quality of films has also improved significantly. The Black Book is set to further boost the profile of an industry many believe is still far from attaining its full potential. Deji Bademasi, CGTN, Lagos.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Husband of slain Kenyan Olympian Agnes Tirop charged with murder and pleads not guilty.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live, Find your voice.
Ibrahim Rotich, the husband of slain Kenyan Olympic runner and world record holder Agnes Tirop, was charged with her murder and pleaded not guilty in a Kenyan court on Tuesday. The 41-year-old Rotich had been ordered last week to undergo a mental health test before entering a plea. Tirop was found stabbed to death at her home in the Rift Valley town of Iten on the 13th of October in a case that has shone a spotlight on violence against women in the East African country. Rotich appeared in court in handcuffs, wearing a black jacket. The bail hearing is set for the 1st of December.
Is it true that you, Ibrahim Kipkemboi Rotich alias Manu, on the 12th October 2021, in the rural estate at Iten, KU North Elgeyo Marakwet County, you murdered Agnes Jebet Tirop? What can you tell the court?
I plead not guilty.
And staying with that story, it is barely a month since the death of a 2019 World Championship bronze medalist Agnes Tirop, and two more Kenyan athletes have opened up about their own experiences with domestic violence. The two women say Tirop's murder was a wake-up call for them and that they are encouraging other athletes in similar situations to speak up about gender-based violence. CGTN Sadiq Shaban has more.
The tragic death of 25-year-old Agnes Tirop, the former Kenyan Olympian and World Championship bronze medalist in October 2021, prompted a rare moment of self-reflection from some of her friends who attended the burial. And not a moment too soon. Ruth Bosibori Nyang'ao, former African Games 3,000-meter steeplechase, says she can no longer remain silent.
I've been keeping quiet, but due to Agnes's death, I don't think that I can keep quiet anymore because I'm suffering. I also fear maybe my life is in danger.
The former Olympian says she was forced to retire from athletics after going broke just 3 years into her athletics career.
And all my sweat, it was taken by somebody who is well known, and I don't have anything at the moment. I'm struggling with life.
Mourners at Agnes Tirop's funeral urged young girls and women to speak up against outdated cultural practices. It's the reason for days after burying her best friend, another Kenyan athlete, Joan Chelimo, has also opted to end her silence.
I was abused. All my athletics earnings were taken away, and I was 1 month pregnant, but I left. So I just want to say, if people will learn how to leave toxic relationship and insecure partners, they can still make it like as I am today. The world knows me as Joan Chelimo, but they don't know my story.
It's the first time in weeks that she's training again. She was among the first people to Agnes Tirop's murder scene.
The society feels like it is important for people to get married, and I am so saddened that, that she had to go through that. She had to die because of insecure partner, a jealous one. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Gender experts in Kenya say many young athletes fear speaking up for fear of retribution from the society. Viola Lagat and others are now calling for a paradigm shift, urging all stakeholders in the sport to come together to address the root cause of the conflicts, particularly among Kenyan athletes.
Money is an issue in relationships with athletes. So it's something that is going to be there with us for a long time, because as long as we're getting this money, there's going to be issues.
The money that those athletes are getting, it should go, and it is a must that it goes to their bank account direct, okay? It cannot go to a spouse, to a relative, to parents. It has to go unless they are minor.
The National Athletics Federation says it will now do more to reach out to troubled athletes, while the government of Kenya has vowed to find justice for the slain athlete. The brutal murder of Kenyan elite athlete Agnes Tirop has lifted the lead on the situation of domestic and gender-based violence, particularly within the Kenyan athletics community. Our athletes say they have been suffering in silence for a long time due to the absence of support structures in place to help them deal with personal issues. They are now speaking up and reaching out to communities and authorities, urging them to pay a closer attention to their general well-being and mental health. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN, in Nairobi, Kenya.
The International Cricket Council announced on Tuesday that South Africa, Zimbabwe and Namibia will host the 50 Overs Cricket World Cup in 2027. The tournament was last hosted in the continent by South Africa, Kenya and Zimbabwe in 2003. Its return after a long absence